This, yeah, in football, I think you have this very scripted, as you say. You know there's going to be 3 questions asked before a game. How's training? How's the manager been? What do you think the result's going to be? After the game, win, lose or draw, it's going to be the same 3 questions. So if you won, you played well today. How were the fans? You've got such and such next week. So you end up saying the same answer, and this is probably why people get bored of it. In my lovely lifetime, I didn't come into football until I was 19, so I had life experience before that. And sorry for swearing, I don't really give a fuck what I say. So hence the reason I get into a lot of trouble.
That's why we brought you in.
Sorry. I get
today.
into a lot of trouble, and the reason I say that is because I see myself as a man in the pub watching the game. So I don't want to hear somebody say, we lost 3-0 and, you know, we were great, the fans were great, but the fans weren't great, they were just booing me for 90 minutes. Do you get what I mean?
Yeah.
So, but like, I don't want to say that, so I'll just say, we were rubbish, I've got to do better, and we're going to work harder to fix it. Now somebody goes, wow, like, that's really, it's normal, it's just a conversation. And I think that's what has developed into what we do now. It's like, we don't mind having the tough conversations because my biggest point, and I'm speaking for myself, is I'm not afraid to be the most stupid in the room. I enjoy going into smarter rooms with more educated people and they say really long words and sorry, I don't know what you're saying. Can you explain that to me? And then they'll try to explain it and I go, well, that doesn't fit with the average day man, woman. So why are you saying those things? So when we did the documentary, it was about, obviously it was about race and education, but it was also about showing every angle of that. Not just mine and my partner's lived experiences, but my daughter who's 8. We had people who were challenging, people that are academics, and the end goal was for the viewer to decide what they wanted to. Not Troy's agenda being pushed onto you and please get on side with me. Here you go, here's an agenda, here's different topics, here's different ways in which we feel it can be achieved, and here's other ways in which people think it's not going to be achieved. You make your mind up, and I think that's the art of where TV is going now. It's about conversation. It's not about pushing your agendas on people.
Yeah, or just lots of noise. I think it's really interesting about then who the storyteller is and who we're actually communicating against, because I think the world of TV can be quite insular, and then we forget actually who the audience is, and talking about the way we tell the story and not with ridiculous long words that people don't necessarily connect to.
Yeah, and how many times do we hear like, well, this is our target demographic and this is who we're trying to hit, and if we get Dion in, that means everyone on BBC is going to watch, and so like we end up going into these tick box exercises where we go, oh, like, if we get Dion in, that's right, and if we get you in, that's right. Well, then what actually is the show? Because we're already taking the creative away from it because we're trying to please everybody, but TV and art is about not pleasing everyone. It's about giving your perception to the world, and then if someone takes it on, fantastic.
I think the one thing that stuck with me, what you just said, is you coming into football at 19 and having lived experience before starting enabled you to be, like you said, you say what the hell you want. You know,
you've been in a lot of meetings when I've done that.
Yeah.
Because you've not necessarily found that though, have you?
No, I've been in the game since I was 9 years old. I was in the system from 9, and from 9 years old, you're told what to do, what to say, when to say it, how to say it. You know, and like Troy said, them 3 questions, it's all, them answers are automatic. They're automatic. You know, there's stuff that you're conditioned to say. And then when I went into making my documentary, I found it very hard to go from being interviewed to now I'm telling my story. It took me, I think I'd say it took me a good month to actually transition from being a person who's being interviewed to a storyteller. You know, if you used to look at some of the first rushes that I'd done, they've probably got put in a bin. You know, but I just needed to understand and understand within myself that this is my living experience and no one can take that away from me. You know, my living experience is my living experience and is how I felt at the time. And that's all that matters, you know, and like Troy said, people can take what they want from my living experience. I'm not pushing it on you to say, this is how you're meant to feel, this is how you're meant to react to what it is that I'm saying, but let me just tell you how it felt for me, and you can digest it and take from it whatever it is that you want.
You know,
I think a lot of, no, most footballers are pretty thick. Most footballers are pretty thick. Take it from me. I know that.
oh, come on.
But hold on.
I dispute that.
Let me finish. Most footballers are pretty thick, right? However, we are very real people, and we have come from the very bottom, most of us. And we have got to where we've got to through the life experience and through, parenting and brothers and sisters. So we are real people, and I think the people that have had the real bad upbringings, what I mean by that, council estate, so I was born in a council estate in Leicester. I had nothing.
Yeah, I think all four of us.
Yeah, exactly. Well, there you
which
go,
is
you
really
see.
interesting. All four of us on this panel are all from
a council
estate,
so therefore,
working class,
when you start to achieve
backgrounds.
It's an amazing achievement.
Yeah.
9 years old. Do you know what I mean? He didn't grow up with a silver spoon in his mouth. He had to work his nuts off to get where he did. And I think when you get to the stage and you're a little bit older, like Troy said, you can sit up and go, well, I want to talk like this. This is my vocabulary. I don't know what you mean. And when people start using the big words against us, it's a class thing. They want you to stay there because you don't understand that word. That makes you there.
Classic Simon Jordan.
Well, Simon uses all those words all the time. That's what he does. Listen, he's an educated man. Don't get me wrong, and he's doing very well on the radio. It's not my genre of, vocabulary. I speak how I speak, and I'm happy how I speak. And I think people understand the way I speak more than they would him.
I suppose that's why I was like, I don't agree with you in terms of about what you qualify as thick anyway.
Yeah.
Because lived experience and coming from that place is an education.
Yeah, it doesn't.
That means you have a lot to say anyway.
Being thick doesn't mean you're not educated. Being when I say thick, I mean we haven't had the silver spoon. That's what I'm trying to say.
There's a saying that my dad used to say before he passed away: "Common sense ain't that common."
Yeah, it's true.
Correct.
It's very true.
Correct.
Yeah.
So Dion, how did you find it then when you first? Because now you were described in the green room as the king of daytime television. So how did you? Because Anton was saying he had to go from giving that line about well we didn't win but we're whatever the lines are that you say in football that you churn out, but then had to go and actually have that vulnerability, which is really hard to do, especially when you're protected by a brand of a football team, right? So then you went from footballer to showing your personality and influence it on different shows like Homes Under the Hammer.
Yeah, I sort of prepped. I was fortunate. I retired at 39. I started doing Sky TV at 36. So I had 3 years worth of doing the I don't know, the big match or whatever it was. Live football and chatting about the games and stuff. So I had 3 years worth of experience. And then when I got to 39 and retired, they gave me a 3-year contract. So I went straight into it. And I was kind of learning on the job. I was nowhere near the finished product. I was just learning about how you say things.
But that was talking about football, right?
That was talking about football.
So what about when you went into daytime, where it wasn't about your expertise?
No, when you go into daytime, again, presenting is a hard skill. You've got to figure out, little chuckle there. And you've got
people think it's easy, and
you've
it's not.
You've got to figure out. What I find hard is how much of the product you give the viewer and how much of yourself you give the viewer. Because you can give too much of yourself, then it becomes a bit of a laughing stock, and too much product becomes boring. So the happy medium of the two I found very, very difficult.
That's interesting. I think that leads us really nicely because presenting, when I did my documentary last year, I had to have a word with myself and actually drop the presenter to be the real me and show actually what really goes on me, to be able to communicate a story about trauma and sexual abuse, right, to people that are victims and represent them. But then what Troy and Anton had to do was that, not necessarily present where you do have to have maybe a little bit of a barrier. So Troy,
I'm probably the opposite. I'm too real on a day-to-day basis. And my missus is laughing at me as I'm saying this because she knows that they have to prep me to not say what I want to say.
Even with your documentary?
Yeah. Because I'll call it too to the point.
Before I ask, I know exactly because I know you.
So I'm probably, I find it easier to talk about the things I went through because I've lived it, I've dealt with it, and I'm pretty cool. It's who I am. Like I've got the scars to prove it. So when it's coming into Sky, it's like, right, don't swear, Troy. I've got like a little prep. Don't swear. Don't call him a knobhead. Don't say this. Like, certain things you want to say that you probably at home saying. It's like,
So you didn't prep for this panel, clearly.
I believe it or not, I actually did for this panel. I said, is there any kids and can I be myself? And they said, be yourself. So
Here it is.
apologies.
Here it is.
You know, before we continue the conversation, I think let's take a look at a clip from your really powerful documentary on Channel 4.
I didn't know this was coming.
Yep.